Hello, everyone. Welcome to our October webinar. I'm so excited to have this session today with my dear friend Nicole. We're going to get into introductions in just a second, but while people are joining the waiting room, I wanted to go over some of our normal housekeeping items, the stuff that we talk about every time, just in case somebody is new that's joining us and has never been in this webinar mode or situation before. So, as a quick reminder, Nicole and I unfortunately cannot see or hear you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. So if for some reason you cannot hear or see us, please let us know. I'm going to make sure that the chat is enabled so everybody can throw their comments in the chat. And also, while you're at it, if you want to tell us where you're joining us from, I always love to see where people are joining in from all over the world. And then the Q&A is also in there. We did set up some time at the end to have a Q&A with Nicole and I. And so if you want to throw your questions in there, I'll keep track of it and we can go ahead and make sure those are answered. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about why we're doing this session today. And I'll let Nicole introduce herself, but I wanted to give a little bit of historical context first. So Nicole and I have known each other for a little over 3 years, I think, at this point. And one of the ways I've met her is actually her organization, Strut, sponsors a similar organization that I sponsor called Let's Talk Ops. They do an annual summit every year. While I was there last month, Nicole actually did this session called How to Make a Great Ask, and I attended it, and I loved it so much. And I just think it's so valuable, regardless of where you are in your career journey. If it's somebody who's like this is your first job, or you've been in this ecosystem for 20 years, it's so important to understand things, what you can ask for, how to ask for things to be able to move the ball forward for you. And I just love the way you approached it. I think it's so important because you approached it from somebody who's been both an employee and also now a business owner. And I've been both of those things, and I, currently a business owner as well. And so I think that's something that's not talked enough about, of like the perspective of an executive and why they make the decisions that they make. And so that's what we're going to dig into today. So I'll go ahead and we'll let you kind of get started by sharing a little bit more about yourself, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Really excited to be here. My name is Nicole Fuller. I am the COO of Strut Consulting. I've been in kind of the client service, financial services industry for the last 10 plus years, almost my whole career. Have been at Strut for the last 4 years and kind of organically grew into the COO role there. I am a new mom and just really enjoying that phase of life. And then as Megan said, we're coming at this from, perspectives of being both, having been both an employee and now business owners. I think we have some, pretty well-formed opinions on what we think makes a great ask. There's definitely hundreds of ways you can make an ask, but I think the formula behind it can translate from each ask pretty well. And then in terms of what we're covering today, we're going to focus primarily on, how to make that ask. I know a lot of us have had really tough bosses, and oftentimes we know what the answer is going to be, and it's going to be negative. And how I know there's probably going to be questions around how do you change somebody's mind or change your boss, and that's a whole nother topic of discussion that we can spend hours on. So I think we'll just cover the kind of meat of how to make a great ask.
Okay, great. And yeah, for those of you who are joining who don't know me, my name is Meagan. I'm the founder and CEO of Tack Advisors. I had a whole career before moving into this recruiting and consulting space, working in hospitality management, both as an employee and as a manager. And then 8.5 years ago, I got into this recruiting and consulting space. And the last 4.5 of it, I've been a business owner and I founded Tack Advisors. So I've seen kind of both sides, like I said. I have had really tough bosses. I've had really great bosses. I've had people who like totally encouraged me and taught me and brought me into the fold. And I've had people who kept me very much at arm's length. And so that's why I think conversations like this are so valuable, because we're going to bring you all under our wing and tell you what I wish somebody had told me 20 years ago, because I'm approaching my 20th year of being in the working world, which makes me feel really old. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about level setting. Take it away, Nicole.
Yeah. So a couple things to kind of think through. First and foremost, and most importantly, is you have the right to advocate for yourself. Regardless of whether or not the outcome of your request is favorable or not, the act of asking is a practice in asserting your value. And if you do this over and over again over time, it helps build confidence and also develops your clarity of purpose in the workplace, which is a really important thing. And we'll talk more about that as the as we go along. Second is approaching your ask with a business mindset, instead of making it overly personal. I know that there are so many, personal situations, factors that go into driving these requests, whether it's, promotions or salary or whatever it is. And that is important. But when it comes to presenting your case to your bosses or your executives, framing up the ask in a way that shows how it benefits the business is going to produce a more favorable outcome. Next, keeping in mind business cycles. So whether you're going through, a challenging fundraising period or there's layoffs happening, probably not the best time to make the ask. Alternatively, if you're going into a fundraising period or in the midst of one that your executives are really confident about, or, your company is clearly in a massive growth phase, probably a good time to start laying the groundwork for this ask. So just having some awareness around that. And then lastly is awareness around how your bosses, your executives like to receive and process information. This is really key. It's all about having that emotional intelligence, that EQ, around, does your boss like to just synthesize information in bullet points and they want to get right to the point? Or are they really data oriented and need, a lot of that kind of supporting information and data? So just having some awareness around that, I think is really helpful in how you frame up your ask.
Yeah, I think all of these are amazing points. And I wanted to add a couple of just additional
Yeah.
thoughts. Um, so kind of starting with that business mindset about not making it personal. I think now being a founder and having a team, and I'm not going to say all leaders are like this,
Yeah.
but I would like to assume best intent that most leaders are like this, is that um, there's such a heavy burden of being a founder and leading a team, and that mental load of running a business and trying to balance what's right and fair for the business and what's right and fair for a person, I mean, can be in some cases debilitating. And so, to the point that you made about not making something personal, I can't stress enough, as I've had employees do this in the past, where it's like, well, I need this extra raise because of XYZ for my family or this or that. I know, right? Like everybody has families, has like personal burdens. That actually puts leaders into like analysis paralysis, and that like burden of that mental load actually doesn't help you in the long run. So going back to keeping it like very business focused and neutral, and spend the time focusing on how this ask is going to remove any burden that they have. That's what's going to move the needle for you. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that like a little bit later, about like what are the things that you can say to move the needle forward that are going to help be, subtractive instead of additive. So in regards to business cycles, and you mentioned like timing is everything. I think it's super, super important. It is, it's been a hard 4.5 years. Like business cycles are constantly undulating, like 2020 awful, 2021 awesome, 2022 terrible, 2023 is kind of at a plateau. So like what could be a great ask 6 months ago may not be a great ask now. And so think about like what is the ask you're doing? Is the ask something that's going to be like hitting the bottom line? Like is it for asking for more money or more headcount? Because if your company's having a hard time fundraising or they're having a hard time hitting sales quota, that wouldn't be the good time to make that kind of ask. But I think I saw a Q&A come in about somebody wanting more exposure in the business, being able to sit in leadership team meetings, which I'll definitely answer that at the end of this. That's a great time to make that ask, right? Like we can talk about that because you're trying to get more access and more context to be more of a strategic partner for your exec and remove burden from them. And so here's the reasons why I should join this meeting so that I can take more off your plate and release that burden for you. That is a good time to make that type of ask. So those are like the kind of things I think you have to balance. And then the one other thing around awareness that I think even I didn't realize until I started Tack. I think it's because the way that I built and have run Tack is so different from the other companies I worked at prior to this. I came from working in hospitality in like huge global organizations where they were very hierarchical, right? Like I remember when I worked at Ritz-Carlton, I don't know if it's still like this, but you weren't allowed to call you had to call an exec like Mr. Smith, not Bob. Like it was so formal and so hierarchical. Whereas now, like in the companies that I've been in, like Tack, and when I was at my last company that was more of a startup, it was like people call me Meagan. Like I'm not Miss Strout. Like I would like my mom is Mrs. Strout. I'm not Miss Strout. Right. And so like understanding the type of organization you're in, is it a flat structure? Is it hierarchical? Um,
Yeah.
Also, are there certain channels and specifically you're supposed to make certain asks through, right? So that's also really important. Again, when you're in a smaller company or it's a really flat organization, it might be totally appropriate to make these asks directly with your executive because like you don't have HR, you don't have legal and finance or some of these other areas where that would be the appropriate channel. But if you're in a much larger organization, it might not have to be your executive. You may have to go to HR for any type of, those types of things. So I think that's something you also need to be aware of is like, how is your company set up? And so, kind of in addition to that, I'll give you an example of this. So, I had an employee a few years ago who had historically only ever worked in hierarchical organizations. And one of the things that we do at TAC, and we did a whole training on this, I'm really big into the organization conscious leadership. They talk about if you have a conflict with an employee, which everybody does, everybody ultimately has a hiccup, like a little dust up with somebody. It happens. Um, they teach people how to do these things called clearing conversations, where if you are having some type of friction with somebody, you actually go to them directly and they give you a structure for how to have these clearing conversations to again like take the personal piece out of it, keep it non-emotive, and just say, hey, like when this happened, here's how it I reacted or how it made me feel or what I perceived or the story in my head, and then you talk through it and you resolve those issues. This person had worked in a very hierarchical organization or organizations prior, and that's not how it was. It was if there was an issue, you went to your direct boss or you went to HR, and they were the ones that's supposed to solve it. And I think that still exists today. So in our one-on-ones, she would regularly come to me and be like, well, I'm upset with this employee, this happened. And I'm like, did you talk to her about it? Like, and she was like, well, no, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, what am I going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Like, we've done training around this. Like, you guys need to, got to work it out. If you want me to come during that clearing conversation to help mediate, I'm happy to do it. But like, I'm not resolving this for you. This is your problem. Like,
Yes.
you need to figure it out. So, that was like, but that's my company culture, right? That's not every company culture. So
Right.
understanding that I think is important. Um, and then the last thing around awareness that I would say is like understanding company optics. So
Mhm.
some companies are very, very transparent, and some companies are not very transparent around things around like titling, compensation, scope of role. Like some companies have very specific leveling structures, like, and some don't. And so when you're making an ask, understanding your company's optics is really important because sometimes it's easier to make an ask for something that other people cannot see and observe than things that people can. And so maybe you really want an increased title, but like your company has a very specific leveling structure. And you can't have X title because that's a better title than somebody who's at a higher level than you, right? And so like you're kind of your hands are a little bit tied, right? And so that's another thing I think you just have to understand because executives again are trying to balance your needs but the needs of the greater company and they don't want to stir the pot.
Yeah. Love it.
No.
Can't agree more.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about being strategic about how to make the ask.
Yes. Okay. So before we even get into making the ask, I want everyone to take a couple beats and reflect on what are your underlying motivating factors. I can't tell you how time and time again, I get asks that are either time-based or they are benchmark, salary comp based. And what I mean by that is somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I've been here a year or I've been here a year and a half. I think it's time. I think it's, an appropriate time for me to get a raise." While that is true, and hopefully your company is doing, annual uh, salary adjustment, annual salary adjustments or at least evaluations on an annual basis, those are not compelling enough reasons to make an ask, especially from an executive or boss's perspective when we are, to Meagan's earlier points, really trying to balance everyone across the organization, balance our budget, and all the things that go into running a business. So really taking a step back and understanding, on for you, what do you want for your career? What are the things that give you energy? What titles do you want and why? What income do you need and why? Having those really well thought out will help you build a more compelling case. And bringing that kind of an ask to your boss is really going to build their confidence in you. So taking a moment to think through that. When you go to make the ask, taking those reasons and being really clear and direct with what you want. I mentored recently someone, and her next career path was COO. The organization did not have a COO position. They weren't sure if they were going to have it. It was a venture capital firm, and she wasn't super clear on why she wanted that or what that was going to look like. And so when she presented, when you go to present something like that to your bosses, it's really hard for them to have something concrete to react to. So being really clear about what you want. Structuring your ask is really important. So again, this kind of goes back to my earlier point, making sure we have enough data points, providing enough context, et cetera. This is all going to be really, really important. And then kind of flowing into the next point is using multiple channels. I always like to have a discussion, especially when you are making a big ask. So having a verbal discussion and then following up with an email. You can kind of reverse that if that makes sense, but really making sure that you have your ask well documented, that you've been able to talk through everything and make it really clear. And then lastly is preparing your boss mentally. So not just showing up to a meeting and dumping this on them. I know that these asks can be really scary. And sometimes if we, go to frame up the ask or hint at it, we think, oh, they're just going to come back and say no. But I can't tell you like how many times I show up to a meeting with an employee and they have no idea, the what had just happened to me. Not saying, this is all about me, but you just don't know like what are the problems that they're currently trying to solve? What are the 911 things? What have other employees, not burdened them with, but, are going through and they're trying to fix. You just want them to be as mentally prepared as possible and able to give you the time that you deserve.
Yeah. I think that preparing the mentally piece, that's where like the fastest ask I think is the easiest, right? Because again, going back to optics, you can, if your company has an annual review cycle or it doesn't, that's something you can ask for. That's something that happens in private, right? So again, optically, like that's something that is an easy ask because nobody else is gonna know, right? So my recommendation is like asking to start having, if not annual, biannual, or quarterly reviews, where you can do a retrospective. So, and then also talk about future goals. So it's like, let's do a quick year in review. Now, again, for those, you need to come prepared. So you need to come with an outline and an agenda and send that information to them in advance. It's not a one-way street. I have worked in organizations where the review was just from top down. And
Yeah.
I think those are terrible. Candidly, I don't recommend those. I think it's both ways of, what have you done in the past you're really proud of? What are things you want to start to grow in areas you want to take on in the new year? And then, where you can add, where you need more help from this executive, and then they can do the same, right? So that's a really easy ask. And then, something that, especially, I know we have quite a few EAs that are in this, that can be a little bit harder just because of timing, because we all know execs will bail on your one-on-ones, but you can ask to try to have a more consistent one-on-one with them.
Yes.
And if it's not weekly, maybe it's bi-weekly, or maybe it's once a month, where in those you're having a section, and again, you need to have an agenda for your one-on-one that discusses any current blockers or challenges you're having in a role and where you need additional support. Which brings me to my next point, which is around your point of structuring the ask.
Yeah.
Your one-on-ones, your reviews should not be vent sessions. They should be, here's the challenge that I'm experiencing. Here's where I need help. What do you think about this? So you should be asking them for advice. I've thought through this. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's the research that I've done. You need to take it all the way to the end, right? You need to be solutions oriented and do as much research as you can in advance and say, here's what I think based off XYZ research that you have documented and hyperlinked in your one-on-one doc or your review doc. Am I thinking about this correctly? Yes or no? And I respond much better to people asking me for advice than people asking me to do more work.
Yes.
I already have like 50 things on my priority list. I don't have enough time. I want all the information to be there for an easy yes or no. So I think that's the other thing where I've seen people kind of make a miss about structuring the ask is they don't do the research. They don't come all the way to the end with a suggested solution. The solution doesn't have to be right, but like it's going to go a really, really long way to show you did your homework and you came with a suggested solution so that all they have to do is say yes or no.
Yeah. And I would say the more you exercise that muscle, especially with your boss or your executive, the more that you get to see how they make decisions and then we'll be able, as time goes on and as you practice that, be able to propose solutions that, they will actually say yes to.
All right, let's talk about comp. It's the
Yes.
most fun, hot topic. It's probably why like 75% of the people are
Yes.
tuning into this webinar
Everyone's
right now.
favorite topic. Yeah, so I think getting into the meat of it, most people's initial kind of gut way that they approach this is going and doing market research and comparing how their salary stacks up against the market. And they use that as the basis for their ask. While that again is important, and we want you to be paid as, what you should be paid and what you deserve to be paid. Again, that is not the most compelling reason. There are so many factors that go into how companies think about budgets, how they think about their comp philosophy, um, you know, where they're at in their hiring cycles, what their needs are, et cetera. So when you go to make a comp ask, I really want you to be prepared to sell it. So keeping a running list of your accomplishments for the past 6 to 12 months is really important. How have you driven growth for the business? Even looking ahead to the future, what are you excited about? What are you going to continue driving? What are the things that even just beyond comp, uh, you know, the things that you want to tackle, and essentially you're showing long-term commitment. Even if you're not going to be there long-term, it is always great to sell it that way. Um, and so just really putting it together in a nice package. Again, how you structure this, I think, is really important. You need to think about what if your boss is a data person, let's try to put numbers to and value to things. That goes a long way. I've seen one of my friends, she made a stellar comp ask. She put a whole presentation together. She was in a tech startup. So, it's not uncommon to go the extra mile. But she put together this stellar presentation that had all of this data and graphs, and qualitative data. And when she went in to make that ask, she not only got what she asked for, but they went above and beyond because they were so impressed. So I really treat this ask as the art of making an ask is something that you want to put a lot of attention into, and hopefully that drives more favorable outcomes for you.
And I think for specifically my audience of people who are usually in roles that aren't making the company money, right? Because it's really
Yes.
easy to come up with metrics when you're in a sales role or in a
Yes.
role like a marketing role or a role that like is literally generating revenue for the company. So, what are the kind of metrics and the things that matter for people in operations positions and administrative positions? And the thing that I come back to time and time again that I tell people is what's most important to your exec is how are you saving them time or saving
Yes.
them money? So, you're not necessarily making money for the company, although I have seen people who will dabble in and help with sales stuff, especially in really early stage startups. But let's talk about how you're saving time and saving money. So, and the things that you should be tracking. So, as far as saving money, um, if you are somebody who is managing any type of vendor contracts, and that can be like if you're planning events, if you're the person who's responsible for ordering all of the snacks and the drinks and the kitchen budget, if you're somebody who is helping do an office move and you're the person who's having to source the movers or the person who is having to um, purchase and design all of the, stuff, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different ways in which you can save money and tracking those things of renegotiating, hey, like we switched from, I don't know, X tech tool to Y tech tool, or when it was time for us to renew, I renegotiated our contract and I saved us $20,000 next year or $50,000 next year. And you add all of that stuff up, right? Like same thing with like I had I was talking to an EA a couple of weeks ago who had like poor thing. She had planned an offsite at this company in or at this hotel in like Montauk or something. This was years ago, and it was like one of her like funny stories she was telling in an interview. And when she got there, the space they were supposed to be in, something happened, like a pipe burst, or like I don't know, for some reason they couldn't be in the space they were supposed to be in. And the size of their group like wouldn't fit in any of the other rooms. So she was like, "Oh, I saw this like beautiful tented thing down by the water that you have. Could we go there?" And she said yes. But they didn't tell her, "Oh, well, we actually use that as like the backup spillover space for like catering." So the place like reeked. It smelled so bad. And so they had to like buy all these candles and like get these carpets and like pipe and drape and all this stuff to like mask the smell of this tent, which was like an additional added cost. And so at the end of the conference, she went back to the hotel and was like, "It's not our fault that your space didn't couldn't be used. We had to expend all this extra money from another company to do like pipe and drape and carpet and like so you need to give me this much of a discount." Right. And so it didn't blow out her budget, right? That negotiation, like document that, right? There's so many ways that you can document how you save money. I will tell you right now, if I had somebody who was in this position that saved me $150,000 next year because they renegotiated all of this stuff for me and they were like, "Hey, can I get a 20K raise?" I'd probably say yes.
Yeah.
The 5x ROI for me.
Yes.
So, and in a sales job, you, when you're hiring somebody, want somebody to generate at least 5x their revenue,
Right.
right? Or but 5x their salary. So again, thinking like a business owner of like,
Mhm.
where can you save time? Where can you save money? Um, Other compensation asks that again, maybe they can't come higher on your base, but other things that you can try to wiggle for is like a higher end of your bonus
Yeah.
percentage, right? Because again, usually your bonus is dependent on the company performance. And so it's not a guaranteed number, but if the company achieves it, now you are at a higher threshold for your bonus. So I think that's valuable. Um, I think asking for a learning and development stipend is really valuable, especially if it's something that you can like come and say, "Hey, I really want to take this course. Here's the reason why. Here's what's going to make me better at doing XYZ for you." That's great. If you're still somebody going into an office, having somebody cover your parking. I had an employee who did that, or not employee, uh, an EA who I placed a year or so ago who had to start coming into the office. And she was just like, "Hey, this is what it's costing me to park. Like, would you be comfortable covering the cost for the whatever parking garage?" And they were like, "Yeah, totally." Right. All of those little things are great ways that are like minimal dollar adds that ultimately add up.
Yeah. Other things are, you know, negotiating a more flexible, work from home situation, uh,
Yep. I
better
did that.
benefits. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can ask for.
Or even the hours you're in the office. So I
Yeah.
did that when I was at my last company. Um, I'm not a morning person. You probably see that I am drinking some tea right now because this is early for me. I'm in San Francisco. It takes me a little while to wake up in the morning. And when I first started at my former recruiting firm, they wanted us in the office, butts in seats, 8:30 a.m. And we could leave like roughly around like 5:36. And I did it for the first year. I was always there on time. I was, you know, happy to do it. However, I found that this was back, pre-pandemic when everybody was in the office, that it was way easier for me to connect with candidates after business hours because they were in the office, so they couldn't necessarily like do meetings with me, do interview prep. So I was still then going home and working till like 8 p.m. at night. And so after a year of being in that role, and then I like absolutely blew my numbers out of the water, and I was very consistent, and I was an enjoyable person to work with. I made the case for myself with my exec, and I'm like, "Listen, like I'm working every night till 8 p.m. Like but do you really need me to be there until 8:45? You know, I'm in the office and I'm grinding. So how do you feel about if I just like kind of come in around 9:30 or 10? Like, so I can sleep in. I'm still gonna work till 8
Yes.
o'clock at night, but it's gonna give me a little bit better of a work-life balance.
Yes.
And I'll even stay in the office until 7 or 8 if I come in late. And she ultimately was like, yeah, because I had proven myself. These
Yes.
reps that again, you want to like have already got like a really great working rapport and like prove that you're doing the job. This isn't like questions that you ask on day one. But like I was able to get that because I was somebody who was accountable and I was something that I had earned.
Yeah. I love it. Great examples. Um, the last thing I will say, just a silly little suggestion, use ChatGPT. I use it all day long.
All day long.
I'm as an executive, I use it all day long. But that can be a really great tool to help you frame up your, especially your emails. And even, there's a lot of AI tools that can help with presentations. I made this off of it. We made this in beautiful.ai. So definitely leverage tools for your benefit.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Promotions. I think the biggest thing that I want to drive home here is you are the best advocate for your own growth. You are in the driver's seat. I may know my employees really well and I may have really great relationships with them, but I don't understand all the nuances of their personal lives, their family, their financial needs. I know what their skills are and probably where they need to be developed. But I don't know what really their long-term goals are. And I don't have full insight into, what brings them energy and all those things. Only you know that. So you need to really be in the driver's seat of your growth. When you're asking for a promotion or to move into a different role, definitely, again, take the time to think about what you want and why, and make that a really clear ask. I would demonstrate how you've mastered your current role. That's really important. I want to understand, I want to know that you understand, the requirements of your current role and you have awareness around, what you're really good at. And also, if there are areas that you need some development in, I'm probably aware of that. It's okay to highlight that and show an action plan for how you're going to tackle those things. But really demonstrating and putting the focus on how you've mastered your current role, and then thinking a couple steps ahead. What are you going to do in this next role? Why do you think you're going to be successful? You can talk about some of the things that initiatives that you want to do, some of the results that you're going to drive. Really, again, really sell it to me. And that just makes a much more compelling ask.
Yeah. I think that especially for things like promotions and or more resources. So like again, getting like coaching or an L&D stipend to do training. I think it's all about making a really consistent argument of like, are you hitting the same roadblocks because of this lack of resource,
Yes.
and this lack of training? Um, or are you hitting the same roadblock because of like you don't have this promoted title or promoted like exposure, right? And
Yep.
so you need to make a really clear argument for that. You need to have done your research and then you need to outline the steps you plan to take to then manage that growth. So it's not, again, an added burden for your exec.
Yes.
So if it's around a promotion, one of the things that I have had employees do in the past that I really like, I've even talked about it in previous webinars, is they took their job description, their original job description, and throughout the year, they had written out all the new things they had taken on in addition to their role. And they wrote a new job description for me. So they took it off my plate because usually when you have a new job and a new promotion, you have to like have a job description title like or attached to the offer letter. So that was again removing the burden of me having to think through like what is this new job? What is this new title? What does this additional added scope of responsibilities look like? And then she went and like did the analysis of like, what is a title for a job like this where you do X, Y, Z? And she like provided that back up. And then she said, and here's the compensation survey that shows like, based on our compensation philosophy, here's like the range that's in this. And then she gave it to me and she was like, what do you think? Right. So again, like made it a super simple yes or no. I've had, the privilege, it's been really cool in the past year. I helped launch EA Rise, their community for EAs, and quite a few of the members in the group have come to me and said, hey, like, I'm up for a potential promotion. I'm up for a potential compensation raise. I have no idea what to even ask for. Like, what do you think I should do? And I took 30 minutes. I said, hey, if you can send me your original job description and answer these questions to me about how your company has grown. And then, like, we'll take 30 minutes digging into how you supported that growth. Then I can give you that feedback of,
Yeah.
based on what you're telling me, what I've seen in, hundreds of other companies of similar size and stage that have gone through similar growth in the scope and responsibilities. Like, here's a updated compensation survey. And like these are the things you need to really lean on
Yeah.
for when you're going and making this ask, right? So again, like understanding those metrics, I think is really, really important. Um, and then the last thing is like that's all about being resourceful, but let's say like you want to um maybe part of the promotion or maybe the thing they're saying, hey, like I can't promote you because you're still missing this one piece of experience or exposure, then you need to go and figure out how you're going to get that exposure, ideally first for free.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
so many tools out there now,
Yeah.
um, like YouTube videos, like I don't know, there's like so many different ways in which you can get an education. And if there's still not a free way to do it, then you need to come prepared with all the different options for you to then learn that in a paid way so that they can say, okay, I'll give you that budget,
Yeah.
whether it's through one-on-one coaching, whether it's through Coursera, or whether it's through like actually getting a degree. And so again, you need to provide options.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And I think the last point on this is oftentimes, especially on the operations and administrative sides of the business, that next roll up does not exist or it's not defined. And in those instances, I would say create the job description, just as Meagan was talking about creating your current job description. I would take it upon yourself to create what that could potentially look like. Giving your boss something to react to is 9 times out of 10 going to give you a more favorable outcome than just coming to a meeting going, hey, I want to be promoted. Nothing exists. What are you thinking? So I know it's not your job necessarily. And I don't want you to think that, taking things off of our plate, we're saying that you need to add all more onto your plate. That's not the goal here. The goal is to think like a business owner, be really efficient, resourceful with time, um, and the people who do approach their asks and their relationships with their bosses this way, I think are the people that advance faster and get the things that they want. So being proactive and taking it upon your plate, again, just being in the driver's seat of your career.
But all right, let's talk about non-monetary. So like
Yes.
resources, initiatives,
Yes.
so all the other very still equally as important things as
Yeah, and I know I'm doing a time check, so I'll run through this pretty quickly. I think the kind of the two of the biggest things that I often find missing when people are proposing for budget or resources or whatnot is defining the problem and answering the question of why now. I want to know, what is the impact of not solving this problem right now? Is there a monetary impact? Is there a people impact? Really make that clear for them, because again, we're juggling 50 plus different problems in the business. And so I need you to build a case for why this problem needs, or this initiative needs attention. And then taking it all the way to the end, as Meagan said, proposing a plan, detailing out the resources. If you are a company, if you work for a company that's budget constrained, trying to do as much as you can for free is always going to get a yes. If you know what the budget is, or know that you may have some money to play with, just do your best at putting together what that plan looks like. They may not say no to every aspect, or things may change, but at least you're, again, giving them something to react to. And then obviously, defining success metrics, and then also defining what the team roles and responsibilities are. So does your boss have a role in this? Is it adding to their plate? Being really clear about that, and trying to limit that as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that. And I think talking about like physical resources, so whether it could be tech tools, it could be more headcount. I still consider headcount like people as a resource. Um, Again, being strategic and having a plan and making a point of how this is going to save time or save money. And then, this is like sales 101. Like the other thing is you have to know what the pain point is of the person you are asking this for, and lean into that pain point and how you're going to remove that burden. So I'll give one quick example, and then I know we have parting tips and we'll answer some Q&A. But this was a conversation I had with an EA recently who gave this really great example. She was an EA manager at a company, and she needed to advocate for more headcount. She actually had the support of her direct exec, who was the CEO, but she had to make the ask to the CFO, who's very data specific, and definitely was going to need a presentation. And so at the time when this was happening, they had a 1 to 2 support ratio of their EA team, so 1 EA to 2 execs. But the exec team was growing at such a rapid pace that with this expected new headcount of C-suite execs, they were going to have to shift to a 1 to 4 ratio if they didn't get more headcount for EAs. And so she had to make the case, and the case she made was right now, as it stands, with everything that is in the EA job description for C-suite EAs, we can't continue to do all these extra things outside of calendar travel and expenses. We can't create presentations. We can't do project management. We can't, plan events. Like we don't have time. All of these other things take so much time. So if we shift to a 1 to 4 ratio, you're going to say goodbye to all those things. And we're not going to be able to do inbox management anymore. All we're going to be able to do is calendar travel expenses. That's it.
Yeah.
And you, as the CFO, will also be impacted. So you're going to now have an EA who will be supporting 3 other executives. Are those things that you want to give up? And then she goes, so my suggestion is if we can keep it at a 1 to 2, great. If not, and we need to do a 1 to 3, here are the things we can keep. And she created this like email distribution list, and like the EA team basically said, okay, so for 1 to 3, here are the things that we're going to do. Any requests that are XYZ requests now have to go into this distro list. And any EA will then tag team and take those tasks on, but it's not going to be your direct EA because these aren't urgent and important asks. These are like extra nice to have asks. And so they're not going to be done immediately, but they can still be done. And so she made this really, really great presentation and like gave like, here's option A that can work, or here's option B, but something's going to give, whether it's going to be like extra headcount money or like additional support for you and the team. And I thought that that was really, really smart of, again, like taking it all the way to the end, doing some research. And I think that that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. And that she clearly took control too,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Great example.
Parting tips before we go into
Yes.
Q&A.
Yeah. So just a few parting tips. Don't be ashamed to ask for what you want. I know, we just talked through a lot of examples of, making sure that timing is right, having some awareness around, your boss and what they're dealing with. But at the end of the day, you have the right to ask for what you want. Um, Keeping a running list of your accomplishments, just like we talked about on the comp side. This can be super simple. It could be, a little folder where you keep a Google Doc or something, and you're just, throughout the days, the weeks, the months, just shuffling some of those away because as we all know, so much happens in our day to day. And so when we get to those conversations, it is really hard to remember some of those key things. Advocating for regular performance reviews. Megan already touched on this, but again, this is one of those areas where if you don't have this within your org, going to your boss and proposing a plan saying, hey, I really want to do a performance review. Let's do it biannual. Here's the agenda. I'm going to prepare the agenda every time. I'm going to ask for your feedback in these 3 areas. And you, again, are just bringing something for them to react to. They're not having to take on any added work. And of course, this is an area that every company should be doing this. I'm not making excuses by any means. But if you are at a company where this isn't happening for whatever reason, I want you to be in the driver's seat again, and take charge. Comparing salaries with coworkers, we all know this is a no-no. If I even get a hint that that is happening, it's a major turnoff for me, and something that is really hard to get over. Um, you know, we're not aware of all the details behind each person individually. Being data oriented, we talked a lot about this. Backing up all of your requests with data. And key information is really important. Making future asks. So sometimes the timing may not be right, but you can always make an ask of especially on the comp side, saying, hey, I want to make X. How do we get there? And then, backing that up with some solutions or proposals that they can react to. So it's not like an immediate ask for money, but they at least know what your goals are, and are now accountable to helping you get there. And then in all of this, I think the biggest takeaway is just making the ask, making the yes as easy as possible. Put the data in there, frame it up in a strategic way, in a way that they just can't say no to. That's really what the goal is.
Yeah. I'm gonna double click really quick on the making the future ask. This is
Yes.
something that we didn't talk about that I think is important. So people who are looking for raises, I've seen this with my clients and with candidates. If your company is going through a fundraise, I have had people who I'm like, hey, like they obviously aren't gonna be able to do this now, but like when they get their Series C close, you can make that future ask and say, hey, I want to get to here. If I hit X, Y, and Z, can we, when that Series C closes, bump me up to here? Right.
Yes.
And so that's again, future ask. I love that. And I think that's a
Yep.
really, really good point.
Yeah. And you want to, your executives, if they're going into a fundraise, they're already thinking about where that money is going to go. And so getting ahead of it, is always strategic.
Yeah. All right. I want to jump into this one Q&A and I'll be curious to know what you think about this too, Nicole. So I have somebody who said, I've been in my role for 2 years now, supporting a first-time CEO and the CFO. I'm excluded from the weekly leadership roundtable meetings, which is around 12 to 15 members of the leadership team. As a result, I feel as though I never know what's going on. I have asked to be included, and this has fallen on deaf ears. This webinar espouses learn how to confidently request the resources you need to succeed in your role. Can you suggest a way that I could word my request so that they could see the value in including me? I don't understand the hesitancy by them. I've always conducted myself with confidentiality and discretion, and it's a bit insulting to be left out of the loop so systematically or systemically. I'm happy to give my thoughts and I'll be curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think there's a couple of things happening here. So the first thing that I heard is like it's a first time CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes half of the battle is execs don't know what best practices are.
Yeah.
And so educating them on that, and there's a couple ways in which you can do it, I think could be interesting because
Yeah.
all the best CEOs that I know and all that I make placements with, or like EAs that I know who are supporting CEOs, have their EAs in these meetings. And it depends on like the size and scope of the company. Usually, if there's a chief of staff, the chief of staff is really the one more so like running the meeting and like doing the agendas, but the EA is still in there solely for context because you can hear and pick up on things that maybe even the chief of staff didn't catch. And then the two of you kind of like scurry off afterwards and like compare notes and say, okay, hey, here's was an action item, here's this, here's that. If there isn't a chief of staff, the EA oftentimes will be that person and will catch those things and then can follow up with the exec. And then again, depending on like your level of sort of like leadership viewing within the company, a lot of these EAs in this meeting will actually be the one and say, hey, like, I just want to flag, it seems like we need to like maybe add some time. Should we like set up another meeting for this? Right. Like, so they'll actually interject. So one thing I would do is if you haven't directly asked, is there a reason why like you're not comfortable having me in the ELT meetings and like hear what they have to say? You should. One, two, um, network with other EAs who have CEOs that let them in meetings and
Yeah.
see if their CEOs would be willing to talk to your CEO.
Yeah.
Because execs want to learn from other execs who are crushing it. And if they have a couple of CEOs who are willing to be like, having that EA in the meeting is a game changer, like then they're going to probably be more open to it. Again, I wouldn't take it personally because I
Yeah.
hear you feel like it's insulting. Sometimes it's a lack of education and sometimes it's a lack of comfort level.
Sure.
And it's the same thing like I hear from EAs who are like, my exec won't let me in their inbox. And it's like, sometimes they won't let you in their box. That's like the one thing of privacy in their life that like their
Yes.
spouses don't have access to, like nobody has
Yes.
access to. And they're like, I just want that one thing for me. So I help sometimes people advocate for getting inbox access too. But again, you want to make the case of like, here's how I'm gonna be able to move the needle forward with you for just having that context. Like I will be seen and not heard. I will
Yeah.
literally sit in the corner, but it's gonna help me be proactive and like managing your time and rescheduling meetings without even having to ask you because I know what the priorities are from you.
Yeah.
Anything you'd add to that, Nicole?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think just a couple things to add to that is sometimes this is something that gets solved over time. So it's maybe rethinking how you're approaching your one-on-one meetings with your exec, and showing him or her, what are why is it important to have you in those meetings and what are the outcomes? Also showing what the impact, making that very clear of not having you in those meetings is also very helpful because oftentimes the executives they just can't see that. So those are a couple things, and that may take time. This is very much like a trust relationship that gets built up over time. So I would encourage you not to be discouraged if it doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
if there are other leaders in the meeting, so if we're talking like director level or VP level, that also may play into it. They may want a meeting space where they can like truly be vulnerable or talk about the things that, they feel are really confidential. So again, it's not necessarily about you. It's about, trying to make everyone else feel comfortable.
Yeah. Somebody else just chimed in saying that they don't have any one-on-ones with their exec. And so kind of going to that same point of like, do you have a proposed agenda of what you'd be covering in that one-on-one? And again, it doesn't have to be weekly. You
Yeah.
could start out as doing monthly one-on-one. So it's again less of a burden. And then you can like slowly back into having it be more regular. That would
Yeah.
be my suggestion. But again, doing all the work so it's an easy yes of asking for this.
Yeah.
And it my what so this exec might need an executive coach. They're like
Yes.
again, I think they sometimes they need to hear from peers or somebody who is like very impressive of what these best practices
Yeah.
are to be convinced. that
Mm-hmm.
these are things that are going to move the needle forward. And so that would be my other suggestion is like try to bring in some third parties that will be compelling and interesting enough for them to listen to help you make these decisions or get these things over the line.
Yeah, that peer pressure is often what gets it over the line.
It's very real. All right. Well, we're wrapping up. Somebody asked, will this presentation be shared? Yes, it
Yeah.
will. So anybody who's registered for this webinar, whether you attended or not, is going to get a post-webinar email with this presentation. So we'll make sure and in the recording. And then we all also will post this recording on our YouTube channel so anybody can watch it. But thank you all so much for joining us. Nicole, you are the best. Thank you for
Oh,
doing this with
thank you
me.
for having me. It was wonderful.
All right,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a great day.
Yes, take care.